Thinking is a skill that can be improved. What's the best way to improve any skill? Learn from a master how to do it well and practice properly until you master it. So, my fifth and final recommendation is simple. Get some help from an expert. That makes sense, doesn't it? It's not just as the ancient Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu supposedly said that, quote, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, end quote. That's true, of course. Unless you take that first step, you won't get anywhere. What's also critical is the direction of that step. Walking 1,000 miles in the wrong direction won't get you to your destination. Unless you want to waste time, effort, and possibly money, get some help from someone qualified to help you well and interested in helping you. Every journey must begin from where you are. It's impossible to start a journey from somewhere else. So, where are you? If you weren't interested in improving the quality of your thinking, you wouldn't be here now. Assuming you've watched the 4 previous videos in this sequence, does my presentation style resonate well with you? If not, take whatever value you find in the content of these videos and go elsewhere with my blessing. If so, perhaps I have an idea that may be helpful if you look at some of my other online presentations. I have 2 websites, DennisEBradford.com, DennisEBradford.com, and endfearfast.com, endfearfast.com. There are also hundreds of pages on former websites that aren't longer active, but I believe can still be found, especially at dennis-bradford.com. I also have 2 other YouTube channels in addition to this Iron Ox Wisdom one, namely Dennis Bradford and Dennis Bradford, Ph.D. I also have 30 books available on Amazon. You might be able to read any that interest you without purchasing them if you were able to get them from your local library, have your library purchase them and then simply borrow them. Otherwise, they're all very affordably priced. They're all inexpensive paperbacks. In accordance with the last video, I also recommend that you could obtain a copy of Dimnay's The Art of Thinking and read it. You see, it's not very long. I once co-authored a logic book, especially if it included material on the so-called informal fallacies or reasoning mistakes and covered inductive as well as deductive logic. There are plenty of good logic books to read or courses you could take. However, they may prove to be of much less value than you initially imagine. The reason is because I suspect that you'd like more than just becoming a better thinker. Why do you want to become a better thinker? Isn't it because you'd like to use better thinking to live better? The purpose of mastering the art of thinking isn't just to master another skill. Yes, mastering a skill, especially an extremely useful skill like thinking, is valuable. Aren't skills, though, really means to some kind of living better? Don't you want to master thinking not just for itself, but in order to improve the quality of your life? Permit me to discuss here the problem of finding an expert to help you and how to solve it. My recommendations here follow from understanding what we are as human beings. What is human nature? What is it to be a human being? I discuss this in other videos on this channel and intend to do more videos on it. This video isn't the place for a long discussion. Permit me, though, to mention the fundamental position I take. The account of human nature that you accept is the critical foundation to your thinking well about living well. A short, good book on this topic is 13 Theories of Human Nature. The account of human nature that I accept maintains that there are two dimensions or aspects to human beings. The first dimension is that we are persons. Persons are conditioned psychophysical entities, body minds, animated skin bags. Our bodies are physical forms, which are our skins and what's inside them. We're animated animals with bones, muscles, connective tissue, internal organs, blood, and so on. Our minds are psychological forms, which are all the objects of awareness, namely sensations, perceptions, thoughts, beliefs, and emotions. A mind just is all those objects. As persons, body minds, we're each separable entities that function in a unitary fashion in the sense that our bodies and minds affect each other. When we burn our skin, we feel pain. When we get angry, our blood pressure rises. There's no such thing as two humans who are one person. We each live our own lives. Any account of human nature that failed to recognize that human beings are persons would obviously be inadequate. There's no disagreement about that. As persons, we act. We do things, or we don't do things. We walk and wash and eat and talk and think and so on. Persons are part of the everyday world of becoming that's in incessant flux. Let's agree to use the word success to donate persons who are excellent in becoming. The second dimension is that we have the ability to transcend becoming into the eternal domain of pure being with a capital B. This unconditioned domain is beyond all doing and so beyond personhood. In fact, many human beings never realize that this dimension is real. They're stuck in becoming. They may even deny that being exists. Let's use the word mastery to denote those who go beyond personhood to sagehood and so manifest excellence in being. Those people who are being blind are simply ignorant of being. The good news is that ignorance is curable. The problem with trying to describe being is that even though it's possible to apprehend it directly or non-conceptually, it's impossible to think or conceptualize it. Pure being contains no entities or forms or objects that are separable. So, since to conceptualize is to separate or categorize, being cannot be conceptualized. In that sense, it could be called emptiness, which is exactly how the historical Buddha talked about it. It's inner spaciousness. Alternatively, with Huang Po, we could say that it's not nothingness, but allness. Stillness is the language of being. It's impossible to use words or concepts to communicate stillness. That said, let's return to the problem of finding an expert from whom to learn how to think better. Again, thinking is a doing. Serious, organized thinking is something that requires effort and is difficult. The good news is that there are plenty of people who are expert thinkers. Presumably, having a doctorate in philosophy is a credential held by master thinkers. And there are plenty of other well-educated, thoughtful people in other disciplines besides philosophy. So, you want to learn from someone who has demonstrated excellence as a thinker. Here's the problem. Thinking has nothing essential to do with having a sufficiently high level of consciousness to be a sage. In fact, many people, even those who are able to think well, suffer from being blindness. Even political or religious fanatics attached to death to their own views can be very good thinkers, although there are also people starting from false premises. You've probably heard the expression, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Those who have worked hard to master the art of thinking tend to overvalue it. The most important lesson of my life is that becoming an excellent thinker is not the same as mastering life or becoming wise. I myself made that mistake for many years. Thinking can yield theoretical wisdom, but only practice can yield practical wisdom. Presumably, you would like to live wisely and not just be able to think well about it. It's possible to understand a lot about honey without knowing what it tastes like. If so, your guide should not just be a master thinker, but also someone with practical wisdom, and that means someone with a high level of consciousness. That's the best criterion for those who master life. That's an exceedingly infrequent combination of characteristics. After all, there is no requirement that sages be master thinkers. Yes, they may be successful philosophers and able to do some good thinking. However, they may also, for example, be illiterate, and so quite intellectually unsophisticated. They may be rather simple-minded and immune to the traumas of contemporary life. The good news is that there are and have been some human beings who are both at least relatively successful as persons and also wise, in other words, masters of living well. Furthermore, and this is really good news that you probably don't yet understand, there's now a way to tell who merits the sage credential. The levels of consciousness can be measured. I'm referring to Dr. Hawkins's map. The levels of all possible human calibrations of the energy levels of human consciousness run from a low of 1 to a high of 1,000 on a logarithmic, not arithmetical, scale. Anyone with a personal calibration of 600 or higher is a sage. That's an astounding, amazingly helpful insight. You should wonder if someone's personal calibration is permanent. No. Someone's personal calibration isn't fixed until that person dies. They can rise or fall during one's lifetime, and sometimes very dramatically. We all do tend to learn from experience, and usually a person's calibration rises a little with more and more experience. You should wonder if measurement mistakes are possible. Yes. That's why it's always best to take measurements on different days or have them taken by different testers. With qualified and experienced testers, however, the measurements are typically very consistent. You should wonder what's being measured. Every entity has an energy calibration. A mountain, or a tree, or a thought, or a building, or a book, all have energy calibrations. Even a newborn baby has a personal calibration, even though it lacks experience and even language. Even just a single thought or judgment has a minute energy calibration. So in theory, that's the key to finding an expert guide. Either find a sage who has demonstrated mastery of thinking, or find someone who has demonstrated mastery of thinking who is a sage. In practice, how should you find an expert? I don't know. I've explained why in multiple books and videos. Here, though, is the procedure that I recommend. It's based on the fact that sages occur only infrequently in the population. Before he died in 2012, Doc Hawkins calibrated that on average there's only one sage in 10 million people. On average, there are many, many more good thinkers in 10 million people than there are sages. Therefore, it makes sense, and more sense, to start with a list of sages and then narrow that list down to those who are master thinkers and teachers than to start with an enormous list of master thinkers and then try to narrow that list down to those who are sages. If that makes sense to you, what should you do? Well, don't look for perfection. Instead of assuming that you need a perfect guide, consider it a blessing that there are many who are excellent guides, and none, at least that I know, who are perfect. Many have readily available teachings. Even those who calibrate in the 500s may be extremely helpful. Furthermore, we're not just stuck in the present. Just as we're able to enjoy the music of dead composers, the poems of dead poets, the books of dead philosophers, we're able to enjoy the teachings of dead sages as well as the teachings of live sages. There's more good news. Many of those teachings are free or inexpensive, and many are easily available. Often they can be found in books available in the library or even on free YouTube videos. There are many relevant books that can be inexpensively purchased. There's reading and there's reading. When you read, think of the author as speaking just to you. Similarly, when you listen to a talk or watch a video, think of its creator as talking just to you. If that procedure makes sense to you, you'll wonder, where is it possible to find, for free preferably, a list of possible masters? That problem I've solved for you. If you ask, I'll give you such a list. If you simply send me an email requesting, I'll send you a return email with a PDF as an attachment with a list of calibrations based on Hawkins's research and my own. There are no strings attached. For example, you won't be added to an email autoresponder list and bombarded with follow-up pitches for something. I don't even own an email responder. Just email me with the subject line calibrations, and I'll send it to you at no cost. Use the email dennis@endfearfast.com. DENNIS@ENDFEARFAST.com. Just in case, here's a backup email address, my name at gmail.com, DennisEBradford@gmail.com. It turns out that doing the calibrations yourself isn't difficult and can be extremely beneficial. That PDF mentions how to learn how to do them yourself if that interests you. The PDF itself calibrates at 582. By the way, Dimne's The Art of Thinking calibrates for comparisons purposes at 487. Especially if you're skeptical of this procedure and unfamiliar with Hawkins's work, consider reading my book, Living Well, according to David R. Hawkins, as a brief introduction. It's inexpensive and readily available on Amazon. Its calibration is 600. You can probably borrow Hawkins's brilliant trilogy from a library if you're seriously interested in understanding his thinking. It's good to be skeptical or questioning, but if you're stuck being negative, you're stuck living with a closed mind, which forecloses living better. Notice that this solves a problem left over from the previous video. Dimne recommends don't read good books, but instead read only the best books. Which books should we read? When it comes to wisdom, skip books that calibrate at 499 or lower. Focus on books that calibrate at 600 or higher, particularly books that calibrate at 900 or higher, or teachings from sages who calibrate at 900 or higher. There's at least one living sage who is a popular teacher who calibrates at over 950. To find out who that is, simply request my calibrations PDF. Last question. Is there another good way to shorten your learning curve? Yes, if you have a little money, a little extra money. Disposable income, they call it. Suppose that you don't know how to surf and it's important to you to learn how to do it as efficiently as possible. Would you teach yourself or hire a coach? Suppose that you don't know how to play golf and it's important to you to learn how to do it as efficiently as possible. Would you teach yourself or hire a coach? Suppose that you've struggled with romantic relationships and it's important to you to learn how to be more successful. Would you settle for trying to teach yourself? Suppose that you've failed at making money and it's important to you to learn how to be more successful. Would you settle for trying to teach yourself? Getting one-on-one advice or guidance from an expert who knows you can enable you to learn any skill more efficiently. Experts in many fields have learned that hiring coaches is not only beneficial, but also in the long run typically saves time and money. Again, becoming is in incessant flux. Your body and your mind are also in incessant flux. If you aren't keeping up, you're falling behind, and that reduces your chances of being successful. Furthermore, you're in the middle of your own life and may lack perspective on what you're doing well and what you're failing to do well. My judgment is that in terms of what you should do to provide the most benefit to yourself and others is to allow a lasting elevation in your level of consciousness. If you've tried to do that, excellent. If you've so far failed, that's not a problem unless you make it one. You've learned a lot about what doesn't work well. Have you had to make all the mistakes on your own? If so, that's typically an unnecessarily painful way to learn. Do great basketball players or CEOs or political leaders or movie stars hire coaches? Of course they do. They have the means to avoid making all the mistakes for themselves, and they understand that coaching can work very well. One-on-one teaching has always been the best way to learn. It's not about telling someone what to do. Socrates understood that the secret was to bring a student along the path to better understanding by skillful questioning. It's impossible to learn for someone else. Each of us is unique. The questions and tasks that work well for you might not work well for me or someone else. Right now, online coaching is booming. Could you find a good coach to help you master the art of living as well as the art of thinking? Even if it has an initial price, it might have no long-term cost at all. Wouldn't an improved version of you attract more money? If you have something worth bartering, there might not even be an initial price at all. In other words, if you might be able to afford it, might you be able to find a qualified and compatible coach? If so, I provide 4 criteria on the homepage of my website, DennisEBradford.com, that I recommend for your consideration. I also encourage you to rewatch this video as well as the other 4 in the series. Why? You'll undoubtedly pick up points the second time through them that you missed the first time. None of the videos are that long, and they're all free. If you'd like that PDF, email me and I'll send it to you. Of course you can become a better thinker. The only question is whether you will choose to do so or not. Even more importantly, of course you can learn how to allow your personal calibration to rise. It's not that you have to gain anything. You already are what you need to be to live well. The only question is whether you'll realize it or not. It's not easy, but it's simple. The way to wisdom is non-attachment. Let go to live better. I wish you well. Peace.